We're now talking about contaminated marijuana that is out in the legal market. We had 15 pesticides on the marijuana product that the state isn't even looking for. 5 of them are 100% banned in the United States and they're not allowed to be used at all. Some of these pesticides, if you look at them, it says fatal if inhaled.
My guest today is Jeremiah LaRue, Sheriff of Siskiyou County. Today he's here to tell us what's going on in Siskiyou County and how he has discovered that illegal pesticides are getting on legal marijuana in California.
There's all kinds of corruption going on at different levels. There are certain labs that are testing, and if they come back with bad tests, they just clear it anyway. There is no way of knowing if the marijuana you're consuming is safe.
I'm Siyamak. Welcome to California Insider. Jeremiah, it's great to have you back on. Welcome back.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's great to be back.
You have found some pesticide, kind of dangerous type pesticide on marijuana and illegal marijuana in your area. And before you told us, you came on the show and you told us what's going on in your community with illegal growers. Before we get into this, can you tell us what's happening now with illegal growers in your area?
There's thousands of people in the community growing marijuana. And what it's sort of, I guess, transformed into a little bit, it just seems like it's more well organized. And now we have people that are coming in from, other states to buy and to transport marijuana that's going now to Southern California, into Oregon and Washington, and then into other states. So it's still increasing. We still have a huge problem. And like you mentioned, I think one of the biggest and scariest things are the pesticides that we're running into. We have people that live in that community that are actually from the cultivators themselves. That
in
are actually,
Siskiyou County, right?
Yes, that are calling in and reporting people because they're experiencing armed robberies now at a really high rate. Just the other day, we had 2 people that came in a vehicle and they pulled up to a cultivation site and they pulled out guns, demanded marijuana, and essentially strong-arm robbed some people and took the product and took off. And then last thing we knew, they were headed towards Sacramento area.
And when things like that happen, definitely they probably don't come to you guys for help, right?
Right. So that's one of the problems. People don't call and report within the community, right? Because they know it's illegal and they don't want to draw more attention to the problem out there. But passerbys will see things. They'll see people in vehicles that are erratically driving, or we've actually, in one instance, we had somebody who was bound and kidnapped from one of the cultivation sites and taken about 2 miles away and dumped off on the side of the road. And that person wound up in the middle of the road and stopped somebody, and they were able to call 911. So those are things that are actually increasing in the community.
And you mentioned the pesticides. How did you guys find that out that they're using these kind of dangerous pesticides?
So it's kind of interesting. So a few years ago, we started seeing the pesticides in the field, but we really didn't know they were pesticides. We were seeing these Chinese labeled containers. They're like Mylar bags. They look like almost like foil. And they kind of scattered around the different sites. And we used to walk over them or, just move them out of the way, and because we didn't read the Chinese writing. So it was probably a year to 2 years ago, somebody got the idea, one of our environmental health specialists, and took a picture of the label and translated it, and it came back listing various pesticides. And so then we knew that we had pesticides containers, and then we started seeing them everywhere. So the story that essentially unraveled from that is that we had the product, like the marijuana in the field, tested that had those bags on site. And that came back with just all kinds of different pesticides that are essentially prohibited in the United States.
These pesticides, is it dangerous for health? Why is it prohibited?
Yeah, super dangerous. So that's a great question. So to give you a little backstory on this, so the Department of Cannabis Control tests for 66 different pesticides. That's in regulation. So they're looking for that to make sure that the pesticides aren't present or they're within certain values or under certain values to ensure that it's safe. That's sort of the idea behind testing. So when we took the samples that came from certain cultivation sites that we had pesticides in, We took that, we sent it off to a lab, and it came back with 23 different pesticides.
Wow.
So of the 23 pesticides, 15 of those in that 23 were not pesticides that the Department of Cannabis Control has in regulations as a pesticide that is tested. So they're outside the scope of the 66 tested pesticides. So then when you break it down even further, of the 23, there's 12 pesticides in those substances that actually suppress the central nervous system. So when you're constantly exposed to that, it'll actually suppress your nervous system.
Wow.
So of those 23, we moved down into, there's 8 different pesticides that are carcinogenic from, California's standard of Prop 65. So and of the 23, 6 of them are groundwater contaminants. So if they get into the groundwater, they contaminate the groundwater. Breaking it down further, of the 23, 5 of them are 100% banned in the United States and they're not allowed to be used at all. And then 3 of the 23 actually are air contaminants, so they shouldn't be out and dispersed into the open. And then of all 23, there are 0 that are allowed to be fumigated, which is what is happening out in the field. So they're essentially putting, it's like a sawdust material. And they open up a package, they put it in a like aluminum can, like a Coke can, they cut it in half, they put the sawdust in there, and they have a little fuse that they light, and they do that within these grow houses, the hoop houses, and it fumigates the inside to it's a gas, right? So it fumigates. And so that's what kills pests and the different things that are on the plants. And so that's being released into the air. It's contaminating everything inside the structure, including the people that are cultivating. So that method of fumigation is 100% illegal.
We're covering California issues, as you know. If you want us to cover the stories that are impacting your day-to-day life in California, reach out to me at siyamak@californiainsider.com. So this is going into these products, right, that people are smoking, right?
Right. So that's another thing that I think, regardless of how people feel about marijuana, whether they believe that it's, medicinal value or they just don't like it, your personal opinions aside, there's a huge public health issue because we have determined, based upon our sampling, that we have product coming from Siskiyou County that is getting into other communities, into licensed facilities, as well as the black market that has these pesticides on it. And people are buying it, they're smoking it, or they're eating it, they're consuming it somehow, and there is no alert going out. I can give you an example. So it was about a year ago, my deputies made a traffic stop on a large delivery truck. It had about 4,500 pounds of marijuana in it. And it was being driven by a driver that was representing a licensed facility in Southern California. And this driver had indicated that he was given money to come up and buy the marijuana in Siskiyou County. And he even indicated that it wasn't his first time that he had come up there to buy the marijuana. So he was headed back to Southern California with this marijuana when we made the traffic stop. And we had 3 samples taken from that marijuana, and we gave those samples to the Department of Cannabis Control. And the flower was tested, and it came back with 8 different pesticides that were very similar to our Chinese labeled pesticides that we've been seeing in Siskiyou County. So we know that that marijuana was going to Southern California to be manufactured into something. And they had come up and done that before. And so it was some time that went on that the Department of Cannabis Control finally revoked the license of this manufacturer. This company, if you look at their website, which I think is still up, it talks about how their product is safe and how it is of the best quality, and that's what's on their website, but in reality, the marijuana that they are using is contaminated with pesticides. And so what that tells me is that the company doesn't really care about the consumer. It's more about marketing and it's about profit. And that's sort of what it's turned into, is people just want to get ahead however they can. And so it's very manipulative, and it ultimately is going to negatively affect the general public that's consuming this. And we talk about it being a medicine, but it is being poorly regulated. And there needs to be a better effort to ensure that people are not smoking carcinogenic marijuana.
Are they still in business?
So this company has had 2 of their 3 licenses revoked. They still have 1 cultivation license, which I'm not sure why. But yes, their business for manufacturing has ceased.
So the state has a process for testing, right? So there's in this industry, there's been a process to test for pesticide, but some of these are not on their list, right? Is that what's happening?
Well, if you talk to people, I mean, this is anecdotal stories, there's quite a few, but the system's just a mess because people are supposed to test and ensure that the product is safe, but there's all kinds of corruption going on at different levels. There are certain labs that are testing, and if they come back with bad tests, they just clear it anyway, and they move on. I mean, it may sound ridiculous, but it's happening.
You mentioned that this marijuana is going to the legal market. Have you seen that happening a lot?
Well, I've seen enough of it. So we've had a series of traffic stops in Siskiyou County where the drivers have been from licensed locations, and they indicate that they're buying what they thought was licensed marijuana, but they know better because you have to have the appropriate markings, right? You have to have the track and trace elements on that. I don't believe that they don't know that it's illegal. It's just easy. It's easier to buy black market than it is to do it the right way. We've had people from the state of Oregon come down into Siskiyou County and buy the contaminated black market weed, and they were headed back up to dispensaries in Oregon. We've had people from Southern California, and then we've had people just around California that have indicated that they work for a licensed facility and that they were coming up to buy what they thought was legal marijuana. And they know better. You have to have manifests, you have to have numbers, you have to have licenses. You don't just do that and hope for the best. It's pretty clear what they're doing.
Going back to the enforcement and how much power you guys have, when people come and you pull them over, and apparently these people have a lot of marijuana on them, right? And then you guys get them, and then what happens? They tell you, I thought it was legal. How does that conversation go?
Yeah, I mean, it's just like that. So we make the traffic stop, we talk to the driver, they indicate that either they thought it was legal or they try to pull that story, off that, oh, I was supposed to pick this up. But the problem is most of the marijuana that we catch people with, it's in huge black garbage bags. And there's no tags, there's nothing. There might be some duct tape on them with some writing that indicates the strain of the marijuana. But people will try to make up a story, and what inevitably happens is that we make an arrest on them, and we book them. And what we are doing now in Siskiyou County, and I encourage other jurisdictions to do it as well, is arresting for felony tax evasion, because that is an actual crime, and it is what is occurring all over California. Because if you don't have licensed marijuana, if you don't have a license for it, then you are in possession of illegal marijuana, and at that moment in time when you are in possession of that, you owe the state a 15% tax on that. And there is no way to pay it because there's a proper channel to go through. So you're in violation, which means that you have evaded the tax system. So it's a fresh felony charge for not being in possession of legal weed. And that should deter people from making a stupid decision to transport 4,500 pounds of marijuana through California. So that's the angle that we're taking now in Siskiyou County.
How did you figure that out?
Just talking to people. We talked to folks at the California Department of Fee and Tax Administration, and the Department of Cannabis Control, a series of attorneys, just looking at the different statutes that's available to us. We talked about this before. The laws in California are so terrible right now for dealing with this problem that we have been trying to be as creative as we can to ensure that we can be successful in deterring people from committing these crimes. And so just looking into it, we've determined that tax evasion is a viable option for making arrests and making investigations based upon that, because it's not just the black market anymore, it's mixed with the legal market. And people, our relatives, family members, people we love that have maybe ailments, they're consuming things that are pesticide ridden.
Today's episode is sponsored by Monetary Metals. In today's world, traditional savings are often eroded by inflation. While the value of paper money diminishes, silver remains a stable, tangible asset. That's where Monetary Metals comes in. Imagine owning silver and earn 12% annual interest on silver, paid in silver. With Monetary Metals, you're not just holding silver, you're allowing it to grow steadily, increasing your wealth with a tangible real asset. It's a way to diversify and strengthen your portfolio over time. If you're interested in learning more about how to make your silver work for you, click on the link in the description or head to monetary-metals.com. Now let's go back to the interview. These people that you guys catch, are they not afraid that they might get in trouble by others attacking them?
Yes, so they do. I mean, oftentimes we see people that have all kinds of firearms with them because they want to protect what they have. But for example, in Siskiyou County, when we have what we call buyers that come into the community, they essentially drive around the streets and they're just looking for someone to kind of wave them down, which is signaling to the people driving around that these people will sell to them. So that's often what happens in the community.
So just random people are coming,
right,
without knowing who's selling.
Right,
just
so
coming to find.
Right, so you're driving around, it's like an open market out there. You're driving around trying to find somebody who's going to sell to you. Well, then you pull up, and what's been happening is there are people that aren't going to pay for the product, and they're going to rob them. And so that's like the example I gave a little bit earlier. People then point guns at each other. Sometimes there's a gunfight. Other times people give up, but it's not uncommon to get reports of gunfire in the communities. But again, people don't necessarily want to report the crimes that they see because it attracts negative attention to the whole industry out there, the whole cultivation operation.
Now, how much of the illegal marijuana coming into the legal, I'm sure it's hard to estimate, but based on your experience, how much of the illegal is coming to the legal market?
I mean, honestly, I would say it's probably a 50-50 at this point, because the amount of marijuana that we see leaving, when we make traffic stops, there's more and more increasing number that are indicating that they work for a licensed facility. And they have, again, 2,000 pounds, 4,000 pounds, 4,500 pounds. I mean, it's not like we're stopping people with a couple pounds. I mean, this is truckloads. And they clearly know that it's illegal, but they're probably getting a good deal. And then it's going down into these facilities and being manufactured into something or just sold at a storefront. And you can't rely on the current tracking system. You can't rely on
the testing will probably be not testing for these kind of pesticides, right?
Well, right.
Or maybe the testing system is kind of not legitimate either, right?
That's correct. So the system in place is not working. We had 15 pesticides on the marijuana product that the state isn't even looking for.
They're not testing for.
They're not even testing for. They're so behind and being so reactionary to this that they are not even looking at the 15 pesticides that we've established are in the cultivation market right now.
Did you figure out why they're using this pesticide?
We haven't yet. That's been a big mystery to us. Where is it coming from? Is it being smuggled overseas? Is it being manufactured in the United States? Because a lot of clearly you can grow marijuana with using things that are in the United States that are legal. So why are they choosing these products from maybe overseas or even local? I don't know. It doesn't make any sense. We've talked about the pesticides, and I've been pretty vocal about it. And I'll bring another story up that was interesting. We started seeing pesticides go from just being out on the ground or in boxes. They were actually being put in plastic bags and tied and put up in trees to hide them from us, because the cultivators are now aware that these are serious felonies to have these pesticides.
So you can get them felonies on the pesticide.
You can get them, yeah. One of the big challenges that when you go to these locations and there's nobody there, it's hard to find those that are responsible for it. Because again, our laws are not written very well. And if you can't catch them...
So essentially, you don't catch them there. Mm-hmm. They are using somebody else's land, and you don't know if that person really knows what they're doing in the land. Is that how it works?
Right. So that's one of the problems. So if you have a piece of land that probably has squatters on it, there are people that aren't supposed to be there. The owners that of record will often indicate that they have no idea who these people are. And so they try to distance themselves, which is a tough battle to prove that they do have knowledge. And sometimes when you show up at these sites, there's nobody there. Or if you do show up, there might be some folks that are trimming or just cultivating that aren't really, I want to say, the ones that are kind of in charge of the operation. These are workers that get sort of trafficked in, if you will, which we've talked about in the past. We have people that have come straight from Mexico over the border all the way up to Siskiyou County, because we've talked to them, and they're either working off a debt or they're trying to find a new way of life, and this was the way that they were kind of sold into assisting with the cultivation. So there's a whole bunch of just this labor trafficking. They call it narco-slavery, which is 100% happening.
Seeing these people come to your county, you have a really large county. How much of it do you think you guys are catching of these transporters?
Yeah, great question. So we've estimated somewhere between 5 to 8%. That's it. And the reason that is because we've got several thousand pieces of property in the county that have marijuana. And then on those parcels, there's multiple greenhouses, and then you start multiplying these figures, 1,000 plants in a greenhouse, and 3 times a year, and you just get these huge numbers. And so we then look at how many search warrants we serve, which are usually in 150 or so range. And that's a lot of work. The guys do a great job. But of those search warrants, we're still only getting about 5 to 8%. So most of the marijuana, and I mean like the majority of it, is going out of the community. And it's going all over different states. And just to let you know, even other states are seeing the pesticides. And in California, there's about 10 counties now that are seeing these Chinese labeled pesticides. And then also looking at Maine and Oklahoma and some other states are also starting to see them as well.
And these people that are transporting, do they come with big trucks? Is it obvious to catch them, or is it just all sorts of people with different kinds of cars?
So all different kinds of things, but what we're often seeing are the U-Haul type trucks, the moving trucks. And they get the really big ones and they just fill it full of boxes. You might see cardboard boxes. I had a video on social media not that long ago that had really large moving boxes, and they were stacked all the way up inside the U-Haul containing marijuana. And then other times it's plastic bags, garbage bags that are stuffed in smaller trailers or stuffed in the back of pickup trucks, or there's trailers and trucks. So it's all kinds of a combination. We've seen livestock trailers full of marijuana. So in our community on a almost a daily basis, you will see U-Haul trucks in and out. And the big question is, are they actually people moving, or are they, do they have marijuana in them? So that's why we have to be good about when we do our traffic stops, based upon, reasonable suspicion. If we smell marijuana or see marijuana, it's all based upon, just the folks in the field doing a good job with investigations.
And are these stops risky for you guys, for your people? Because you mentioned that most of them are armed, right?
Yeah, so they are. A traffic stop in general is one of the most dangerous things that an officer will do, and you don't know what to expect when you're walking up to the vehicle, and you don't know if they're armed. You don't know a lot of things, and so you're just You have to rely on good training and officer safety when contacting the driver. And then, through an investigation, you determine sort of what's going on inside the vehicle and where they came from.
If you couldn't arrest them on tax evasion, what would be the penalty for this?
Right, so it's generally a misdemeanor. It's having more than 7 plants, or it's having marijuana for transportation that is for sale. And again, we're getting down into the misdemeanors because when they reformed everything through legislation, they took out all the punishment. I mean, all the wind out of the sails. And so most of the people we pull over, they're just expecting a citation. And sometimes they even have citations from either a previous traffic stop in a different community or a different state for the same thing. And they don't even care. But now, with tax evasion, when we let them know that it's a felony, they look very surprised.
This is supposed to be a way to do it legal. Why do people not do it legally and just do it the right way?
Well, like with anything, you're always going to have people doing things wrong. I mean, that's just our human nature, for one. But it's cost prohibitive to do it legal because there's so many regulations, and people don't like to be told what to do. And so there are state regulations on how to do and cultivate and grow and all that stuff, and sell, and I think people just want to bypass that the best they can. So if they can save any kind of money by getting marijuana that is grown illegally, they're going to do it because it's about money. It's about profits. I don't believe most of these folks when they're trying to indicate that they're looking out, for the consumer. They just want to sell stuff. And so it needs to be regulated because it's like the pharmaceutical companies. I mean, if you don't have regulations on things, who says that they can't put things in it that do all kinds of things to your body? And they would if it saved them money. So it's the same thing. If we're treating marijuana as medicine, why are we not being serious about it?
You mentioned Prop 64 is the root cause of all of this. Are there any efforts to change Prop 64?
Yeah, not that I'm aware of. Prop 64 is a total disaster because, again, the idea was to make marijuana just more available to people and decriminalize the punishment for cultivation. And it might look good on paper, but then the practical application in the field, in the real world, triggers this entire black market to thrive because there's no regulations that are established to prevent people from abusing it. And that's exactly what we saw. It's almost as soon as they passed that proposition, it spiraled out of control.
Because you can do as many, you can have as many as plants as you want, and then the penalty is only a misdemeanor and a few $100s, right? Is that
right? So the law right now is you can have 6 plants, and if you go over 6 plants, shame on you. It's a misdemeanor, and it's like a $500 fine. And oftentimes the court systems will defer it and throw it out entirely because they've got bigger crimes, to deal with. So the average person doesn't really get much out of it. And if you have 7 plants or 7,000, it's the same thing because there's no upper limit to that. They never established that in the law. Maybe they just thought everyone was going to be good boys and girls, but they haven't. And so that's where Prop 64 took us. And I don't know of anything in the legislature that is trying to address the environmental damage, the animal abuse, the just rampant, pesticide use. There really hasn't been anything to address that. I mean, it's something we could all get behind. It should be a complete bipartisan bill that comes out that deals with this because it's so bad. I mean, I don't know anybody that would want to smoke contaminated marijuana, let alone a cancer patient.
And the people that are doing this legally and they're paying taxes, they're kind of losing too, right? We are hearing that they're not doing well, right?
There are people that try to do things right, and they're
competing with this.
Right, and it's almost hard to compete with that because they're going to lose out because they're trying to do it the right way, and it's expensive because there's regulations, there's permits, there's fees that you have to pay, there's inspections. And if you can bypass all that, you're going to make more money. So I don't see how the legal market, number one, can be happy about this. and two, can survive without subsidies or something from the government, which is, I'm pretty sure has happened, where I think there's been some money pushed into the legal market to try to save it. But it's poorly built from the ground up, and they need to go through and revamp the whole thing.
If you like California Insider and you like to know what's going on in California, make sure to check out Epoch Times. This is a newspaper that started by a group of Chinese Americans because of human rights abuses in China, and now is starting to grow here. Make sure to go to the Epoch Times website and check out the California section, where you can get a lot of fresh perspectives on what's going on in California. Now let's go back to the interview. So Jeremiah, in this topic, you must have seen a lot of crazy things out there. Do you have anything to share with us, the most outrageous thing that you have seen?
A story a while back where there were folks in cars that showed up to get marijuana, to buy it, and they pulled out guns. They zip tied this entire family behind their back and pushed them into a room, trashed the house, looked for money, and I think stole a couple $100,000 and some marijuana, and then took one of the females that was there to help them get them out of that community, because they were lost in there, because they were deep inside our cultivation area. The person later was able to escape at an intersection farther down the road and call for help. Not that long ago, we had another instance where there was another homicide, and somebody was essentially beat to death in the cultivation area, and nobody wants to talk. And it makes it really hard to investigate, because, you know, I have a duty as sheriff to preserve peace, but to protect everybody in the community, including the people that are cultivating. And I may not like, you know, what their behavior is, but they're still people. And I have a hard time protecting them when they don't talk and they don't communicate. And I don't like that. I don't like that that's an element in my community where there's so much rampant crime that, you know, people don't want to communicate to law enforcement because they're afraid that when we respond, we're going to see their illegal activity. But I'd rather that they let us know when people are getting violently assaulted, or there's you know, just other violent crimes occurring, so we can be there and handle it, you know. And it's not that we're turning a blind eye to anything, but we have to take care of these people. They're being exposed to dangerous pesticides. They're being asked to work in these terrible conditions, and so we have just a very ugly environment that the state is not helping us out at all anymore. I mean, I asked a while back for assistance. They came up one time for a week, and that was a year ago in the summertime, 1 week, and have not returned since.
Hopefully they will come back.
Well, they better come back, and I'm hoping that this message gets to the right people that are in the industry, that can communicate to the right people to say, you know, enough's enough. I don't want to smoke contaminated marijuana. You know, I want to be able to have safe marijuana, and I demand better from the government. That's what people need to be saying in the right positions. I'm just letting people know. I'm alerting them to the fact that there is no way of knowing if the marijuana you're consuming is safe unless you personally have it tested in a lab somewhere that is going to be
testing for those pesticides.
Yes, testing. Well,
because you could test for other ones and it could be fine, but not these ones, right?
Right. It needs to be tested for everything, because that's right. They test for 66 pesticides as the state looks for, but then we have 15 that aren't showing up. So you need to have like a full spectrum analysis of the marijuana. And another thing I want to add too, you know, we should be demanding that the state do some kind of research or have higher education do research on the long-term effects of smoking marijuana that has these types of pesticides on them. They don't have any, like none, even on the ones that are currently tested for, the 66. To my understanding, there is no long-term study on those levels. So say you do a test on marijuana and it is of the 66 known, you know, pesticides, but the levels are higher than the acceptable rate. The acceptable rate, there's no research on that really. My understanding is a lot of this came from tobacco and how they were to test things. And so there's no, to my knowledge, any studies or research on long-term effects of smoking marijuana that has pesticides on them. And that needs to be done.
You said they're fumigating these grow houses with these kind of chemicals. Do you think the people that are doing it are at risk as well?
Oh, yes. Over the years, and it's a little bit of anecdotal stories, but we've had folks that have gone to the emergency room from the growing community, and they've complained of chest pain, or they've had issues with just upper respiratory issues with their lungs. They've had difficulty with their vision. And so we know that if you look at the different pesticides, their side effects are consistent with how these people are feeling. And we've even had people in the field, our investigators, people that have helped us, even from the state, that have come up. They've been exposed to the fumigation because they didn't wait long enough to go into the structures. And they have had similar
issues. The fumigation
issues.
was going, and then they went to check the structure, and then they
Right, it had been recently fumigated, and so inside it still had residual effects, and the people wound up with skin irritation, eye irritation, difficulty breathing, and so that's happened to investigators as well. And so we do know that you could directly link these fumigants to negative reactions in the field. Now that also is going on the plant, and then later someone is smoking it.
Them.
Yeah, and so some of these pesticides, if you look at them, it says fatal if inhaled. Now,
Wow.
To what quantity does it take to become fatal? And that's the thing that there is no research on. I'm trying to do my job of being creative and getting the word out, and I'm having marijuana tested, and I encourage other places to have marijuana tested. There was a LA Times article that came out not that long ago where they went and tested marijuana at different dispensaries, and they found similar things, that it was beyond the acceptable range. So, and that was from licensed places. So it's not just something in Siskiyou County. I mean, so
it's coming everywhere.
Right. What does that even mean? So you smoke marijuana with some pesticide on it that's above what the state says is the threshold. Well, does it take a couple hits off of a joint, or does it take 2 pounds to cause cancer? What are the harmful effects? And I mentioned earlier about the central nervous system and being affected by it. And so it can cause seizures and cancers, as I'd mentioned, and difficulty breathing, and it just has long-term very negative consequences at I'm guessing higher levels, but we don't know until the state does its job.
Jeremiah, do you have any other thoughts for our audience?
I just want to reiterate a few things with you. People need to realize that the whole cannabis industry in California it's just been a very terrible rollout, and it has not been what we were promised by the state. Good intentions maybe, but right now we have, at least in my community, organized crime that is controlling the marijuana industry, which is the black market. And this organized crime is going throughout California, selling marijuana to both licensed locations and just in the black market. So what has happened is the black market has integrated with the legal market to make this like gray market where no one really knows what's safe anymore. And so the marijuana we have shown through testing is contaminated with pesticides. The pesticides are not even being noticed by the state because they're not on their radar, because the pesticides we have that are of the Chinese labeled pesticides go beyond the state testing. And so there are serious health consequences to smoking marijuana that has these pesticides on it. And so people need to be aware that if they are buying marijuana from anywhere or getting it from anywhere, there's a strong likelihood that it is contaminated. We don't know what the long-term effects of that are, but people need to be smart about this, and they need to demand from leadership that we do the right thing and get these things studied, and we need to get some better laws on the books that decrease this problem. The average consumer is unaware of this, and they're going to these facilities to buy legal weed, if you will, and they're unaware that they potentially are smoking carcinogens. And if we're going to treat this as medication, then it needs to be dealt with appropriately, and we need to see a little more, I would say a lot more, just aggressive proactivity from the state leadership as well as the legislature, and also the scientific and medical community, so that they can properly research what the pesticides do at these higher levels, so that they can get that information out and that we can better protect Californians.
Jeremiah LaRue, Sheriff of Siskiyou County, it was great to have you on California Insider.
Thanks for having me back. It was great.